So now, our first Hackathon presentation. Well, this one brought in VR that we were just talking about. And I think a lot of people, when they think about VR, they think about like futuristic looking spaces that are all shiny and metallic and everything. But for this one, Jason Powell decided to take things in a different direction and kind of create a 80s tribute to pop culture with a very retro vibe. So let's go to Jason now to check it out.
Okay, I'm feeling a Stranger Things title screen popping up.
All right, thank you. Let me just share my screen. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jason Powell, and my Hackathon project is called Dudical Dungeons. It's a 1980s inspired virtual reality experience built using A-Frame, a framework for creating web VR content. A-Frame uses the entity component system, an architectural pattern that is mostly used in game development. ECS follows the composition over inheritance principle, for example, which allows greater flexibility in defining entities where every object in a game scene is an entity, for example, enemies, walls, or coins. Every entity consists of one or more components which add behavior or functionality. This approach allows the developer to isolate and customize every element in a scene rather than dealing with wide inheritance hierarchies. A-Frame syntax is very similar to HTML, which makes it easy to get started with, but it can be enhanced with JavaScript and is compatible with many libraries such as React, Angular, and D3. It's well suited to making VR games, but the possibilities of its use are extensive, and it has been used to make apps for education, activism, and more. Dudical Dungeons is designed to be used with the Google Pixel Daydream headset and remote, but also works on most browsers. The Daydream remote does not work by default, but I utilized—
You crazy fool!
Some sound there. But I utilized a custom-made component to add support. This demonstration has a simple cursor for interacting with the environment, but the Daydream version can use the remote to point and click on things as well as move the player. Dudical Dungeons takes advantage of several of A-Frame's built-in entities and features. I created an entity to represent the player, which I then used as a container to hold the camera and movement options. It uses WASD and mouse look by default, but it supports gamepads too. Audio in A-Frame is tied to individual entities and is positional by default. So the audio that an entity emits will sound more faint from a distance and will be heard primarily through the ear facing it. The background music is supposed to be heard evenly throughout, so positional audio created a challenge in attaining that. I resolved the issue by nesting the sound entity inside the player entity and positioning it a few inches behind the camera, so it's always coming from both speakers and has consistent volume no matter where the user goes. I also used A-Frame's lighting functionality to create dynamic light sources that illuminate the walls in front of the player. This makes the maze seem more immersive and interesting to look at. The walls and floors in A-Frame are normally able to be passed through freely, but I configured my app so that the player collides with them and stays rooted to the ground. The walls are dynamically generated using a JavaScript array as a map and loop to build them in the scene and add textures. This approach saves a great deal of memory compared to making individual wall entities. The sky is rendered using the video sphere entity, which creates a 360-degree sphere around the scene using a video file for an immersive experience. This recording was taken at 30 frames per second, but even with music, video, and 3D objects, the app runs at a solid 60 FPS.
You crazy fool!
The 60 FPS target frame rate is important for VR experiences in order to prevent the user from becoming uncomfortable. In its current form, Dudical Dungeons is mostly just a sandbox for playing with A-Frame's features, but I intend to continue adding functionality and eventually making it into a game with a variety of levels and challenges. While working on it, I joined the A-Frame Slack channel and received a lot of helpful tips from the community, and even communicated directly with some of the creators of the components I was using. It is young, it's only in version 0.5, but the content and support is growing quickly. It's relatively easy to learn, so I encourage anyone interested in web VR to give it a try. Thank you for listening, and if you'd like to check it out, it's deployed at that link right there, and you can also check out the GitHub repo if you'd like to add to it. Thank you very much.
Wow, that was like Clockwork Orange for the 80s. And with Jason's narration over it, it was, I don't know, it brought me back to
Wolfenstein 3D.
Yeah, Wolfenstein 3D. But that was very impressive. I think you captured everything I remember about the 80s. We'll have to put an epilepsy warning on that video, which I think
for people
applied to the entire 80s. Yeah. great.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember when Jason first started that project. You only have a long weekend to do these. It's Thursday through Sunday, and he was telling me, "Oh yeah, there's this new framework called A-Frame. It's still new, but I want to check it out." And then by the end of that long weekend, we had that. So, really great job.